Hi, today we're going to be talking about using page layout using CSS. So we're going to start going from sort of learning about this stuff to actually doing it and why we do the things that we do, and sort of bring the stuff that we've been learning about into focus and start applying what we're going to do. So we're going from sort of the basics to the application stage at this point. Up to this point, you have heard me talk about the boxes or containers that we use in HTML, and this is a diagram of how those break out, where you've got the content in the center. Around the content you've got padding. Around the padding you've got a border, and then outside of the border you've got a transparent margin. So those are the areas that you can style, and every container, whether it's a div or a H1 or a paragraph or a unordered list, anything that you use in HTML is going to use this box model, so you can affect those elements around the content so that you can start controlling the way things look. And it's important to recognize this because each of these boxes is, you could consider an object. And we're going to talk a little bit about the document object model, which is the model of all of the objects that are in your HTML, because knowing what the objects are and where they sit in relationship to the other objects. For instance, you may have an object sit inside of another object, or two or three objects sit inside of another object, and they relate to those objects that are containing them in a way that we're going to start talking about today, for instance, with positioning. And so it's really important to grasp this basic concept. And when we start talking about the document object model, what you'll have, and this is a sample document object model where, say you were doing an encyclopedia, you might have a section on science and a section on culture, and or a chapter. Think of it like that. It's an object within the encyclopedia is the chapter on culture. Well, within that chapter on culture, you might have a section on art and a section on craft that sit within that culture. So you can take and draw a tree that represents the document object model of whatever you're doing when you are using HTML, and I'll show you how that works just in a couple seconds. But it's necessary to do this to realize that art sits within culture. Art does not sit, in this case, within science. That's not to say that science can't have an art object inside of it, but in this drawing, art sits inside of culture, and science and culture both sit inside of an encyclopedia. So that is a way of visualizing the structure of the document object model. And let me show you how to look at this. The first thing that I want to do is, well, first let's go to the way that you can do positioning. There's sort of several different ways that you can position documents. The first one is absolute positioning. Now, the thing to understand with positioning is when you take things out of the normal flow of the document. So if I go into this document and I disable all the styles, then this is the content that would be on the page if we didn't have any style elements applied to it. So there's sort of this is your document object model over here. It's not clearly visible at this point, but everything flows in the order in which it's presented in the HTML. So we've got this part that tells you that section 1 goes immediately below it. Then we've got this section 1 that contains these two parts, and then there's section 2 and section 3. Now, what we're able to do with positioning statements is we are able to move things from that normal flow of the document. So I'm going to turn the CSS back on, and I've applied some styles to this. So I'm turning the styles back on, and what you see is that section 1 that used to sit right below here is now down here. It's been colorized and it's been applied some absolute positioning. So I absolutely positioned this 300 pixels from the top and 300 from the left. So what that did is, from its normal location, it moved 300 pixels in from the left and it moved 300 pixels down from the top. So that's where this ended up being located, whereas it would have normally been above this section 2 area. Now if we go and look at relative positioning, now the important thing to realize is that the absolute positioning moves that out of its location where it was in the normal flow of the document, and it allows, absolute positioning allows other elements to come in and take that location. Whereas if I go to relative positioning, what that does is this, again, this is 300 pixels in and 300 pixels down, but this is relative positioning, and what relative positioning does is it preserves the location that came out of. So while it's no longer sitting in that space, relative positioning holds the space that that element would have used so that nothing else can come into that. That's an important distinction to recognize as you start moving forward and wanting to reposition things outside of the normal flow of the document. The next element is fixed positioning. You're starting to see fixed positioning used more. My personal opinion is that I don't care for fixed positioning, but it is one of the tools in your toolbox. You mostly now see it with ads. But what fixed positioning does is it does not preserve the location in the normal document flow, but wherever you place it to, no matter what happens to the browser, it's going to maintain that location in the document flow. Okay, so fixed position really mostly applies to when you are scrolling left or right, up or down. It's going to move when you have different size windows, of course, because it's going off of the new numbers that apply within the size of that viewing window. But this allows you to scroll and that object will stay in that same location. So that's fixed positioning. It moves it out of the normal document flow, does not preserve that space in the normal document flow, but it will stay in the same location even when you are scrolling through the page. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to the template for positioning, and in this case there is a document object model here, and I'm going to take a look at that. And what I'm using is, I'm in Firefox and I'm using the web developer toolbars, and this is a set of tools, you'll see me use them regularly, that allow us to investigate and manipulate the web pages that we encounter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a DOM inspector. And so I bring this up, and what it's doing is it's going off of this positioning starter file document that is linked to from my exercises page now. And what you see is the document object model nodes. So I've got a document here. It happens to be an HTML document. Within that there is, and let me go ahead and bring up the source code for this page so that you can see what that looks like. So I'll set this over to the side, and then I'll place this over the top of it so that you can see what we've got here. So we've got the HTML tag up here, and that's this here. So inside the HTML, and that HTML tag opens here and it closes down here. So inside that HTML tag then we've got a head tag which opens here and closes here. And is there anything inside of that head tag? There's some text. It's given the meta right here, and the title, which is right here. So inside that document object model, we've got the title and the meta tags that are inside of the head, and it's telling me that inside the title there is text. So that lets you show that within the container or the object called head, we have the meta and the title, and we can see that in a hierarchical form or a tree structure. Then we come down to body. Within the body tag, you'll see that I've got 4 divs. The first div is box 1, so you see the div ID of box 1 here, and then there's some kind of content in that. That's what this little arrow here represents. So inside of div box 1, there's another div with a box of 1A. So you can see that box 1A sits clearly inside of box 1. The same thing for boxes 2, 3, and 4. And you can see over here how the divs, and the way you can see it when you're familiar with the code, the div opens here and it closes here for div of box 1. Inside of that div is another div tag here called box 1A, opens there and closes here. So if you ever start getting into problems where you can't determine where a div starts and ends, you might want to go to this tool and let it show you where those divs start and end, because what it does is it'll show you the structure that you've actually built in, whether that's the structure you actually wanted to build in or not. So that is the document object model, and it's an important thing to understand as we start moving forward with the positioning, floating, and the other ways where we manipulate the content of pages. So what I want to do right now is I want to bring up Dreamweaver, and I want to show you how we can start to manipulate some of this content. So what I'm doing is I'm going to my exercises folder, and I am opening the file called it's inside of positioning, and I called that the positioning starter file.html. That's the same box that we looked at. Now I'm going to move this out of the way just so that it's not there visual. And what I want to do is I want to start to manipulate this content. And this is actually something that you need to do in response to this exercise. You need to go to my exercises page, make your way to the positioning document, so the template for positioning, and then actually the best way to do this is from this link you right click and you choose save link as, and then that will allow you to save that HTML document to wherever your site is when you created it at the beginning of the semester. Mine happens to be under my documents folder, under a folder called sites. And so I would go in and I would save that into my exercises folder so that it's available. I'm not going to do that because it's already there. So you would go in and save that into your exercises folder, the same as you have for everything else, and then go into it and open Dreamweaver. Now I'm going to adjust a couple things here. I'm basically going to start playing with some of the CSS so that you can see how we are able to work within this document object model. Now, the first thing that I want to do, and this is for your benefit so that you can visually see what's going on here, is that I want to actually show you the box model of this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new div or a new rule that will allow us to do that. This is not something that I would normally do. I'm only doing this for the sake of helping you to visualize what's going on. So I'm bringing in my CSS Styles rule because we're going to start playing with the CSS styles in this document. And what I want to do is I want to create a new rule. So I'm clicking the new CSS rule widget, and when I bring that out here, what I want to do is I'm going to apply this to a tag. So the tag that I want to use is div, and again, you don't need to do this. I'm doing this simply so that you can visualize the box model on this page. It's not something I would normally do. I wouldn't normally apply CSS to all divs. But that's what you'll see right there, that's what I'm doing. So whatever I'm going to do right now is going to apply to all the div elements. Now in this case, I just want to do this in this document. I don't want to attach an external style sheet because I'm just playing, so to speak. So I'm going to click OK. That's going to create, you'll notice over here, a new set location for styles for div inside of my positioning starting file document. Now what I want to do, the first thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and give it a border so that we can see the edges of the different objects that we're working with. And I'm not going to do anything fancy here, but when I'm giving a border rule, I have to give all three rules for it to be visible. I have to give it a style, a width, and a color, and I'm going to go ahead and go black on that. And then I apply that, and what you'll see is that I suddenly have a whole bunch of borders up here, but it's still hard to see how that works. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the box, and I'm going to give each of those a padding. We'll just say I'm going to use them the same for all, top, right, bottom, and left of 5, and then I'm going to give them a margin of 5. So if you go back to that box model that I was using before, I'm going to give it a 5-pixel padding between the content and the border, and then I'm going to give it a 5-pixel margin between the border and whatever is on the outside. So that's what I've done here, padding and margin. And when I apply that, all of a sudden you can start to see, and I'm going to go ahead and close that for now so I can move this stuff out of the way. You can see that I now have visual boxes around each of those objects, and now you can clearly see the document object model where this box is sitting inside of this box. You can see the padding of 5 pixels around that content, and then outside of this margin, I've put the margin in, and then outside of it there's a 5 pixels between that and anything else. So the space between here and the bottom and the space between this text and the margin or the border there are because I put the margin on there. So there's your object model, and this clearly sits inside of this. And going back, if you recall, there were 4 different major boxes in the body section. Each of those were divs, and that gives me a visual for how I can actually see the way that my box model is working there, the way my document object model is working there. So I'm going to go back, and I'm going to reopen my CSS for that div. And you notice I went about grabbing a different way there. This time I went and I knew exactly what I wanted to work on, and I'm going to choose the pencil there. Now what I want to do is I want to add some positioning for this. And so this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go down to the positioning for this. And the first thing that I want to do is, actually I'm not going to do this for all the divs. What I want to do is I want to do this for box 1. So over here I choose box 1, and because I want to make sure that I'm working with box 1, I click on my context specific navigation down here that clearly selects it, and you can see that it highlighted it in blue here and it outlined it in blue here. And what I want to do is I want to do a new rule. Again, I want it for this document only. It's for the ID of box 1, and so I click OK. And let's bring in some positioning here to see what's going on. And I'm going to stick with the numbers that I was using in the earlier demonstration so that you can see how this works. So I'm going to positioning, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go with the top of 300. So what that's going to do is move it 300 pixels down from the location of in the normal document flow that box 1 is. So the normal location is this point right here. This corner is the top left location. So it's going to go from that top, it's going to go down 300 pixels, and I want to go 300 in from the left. So that's not move it left 300, it's 300 from the left. And when I click on OK on that, you'll notice that nothing happened. So I've given it a placement, but I haven't given it a set of rules about how to position that. So I choose the positioning, and if I choose absolute and I choose to apply, all of a sudden that box drops down. It comes over 300 pixels and it comes down 300 pixels. So you can look at your ruler here, and it's moved over 300 pixels and it's moved down 300 pixels from the 0, 0 location that it belonged in before. And now the reason it didn't show in the 0, 0 before is because of the padding and margins that I had included. So, but since I applied absolute, now these other things moved up to take the location that it had previously been in. If, however, I choose relative, and those are the two that you will choose most often, and I apply that, you'll notice that it reserves the space that it used to be in, and then it still moves down to the new location, which is 300, 300, but now it also applies the padding and the margins. So 300, 300 is about here, and that incorporates for the paddings and the margins that we have there. So that has moved down there. And so that is the basic rules of how to position. So if I put this at the top of 0 and the left of 300, it moves it over there. And you can do the same thing for the other boxes. So what I would like you to do is I would like you to go in, download this positioning starter file, and then start playing with the positioning. Try to position each of these boxes in their own corner here so that you have a four-corner ring, so to speak, of this. Try positioning these inner boxes, box 1A, box 2A, within each of those divs and show me what's going on. You can also play with the height and the width. So I'll give it a width of 300 and a height of 300. And so what this does is it allows you to start taking and applying rules to individual objects in the document object model, and to see how those rules affect the way those items around that item interact with it based upon the rules that you have applied. So go ahead, download it. What I want you to do, make a link to this file from your exercises page. This is not a graded exercise. This is an exercise so that you start getting the concept of positioning. And we will use positioning in the next couple of labs that we do when we start working on the tic-tac-toe. That's all that I have for now. Hope you all have a good day and have fun playing with this. This is when the rubber starts hitting the road. Bye.